Hey everybody, my name is Andres,
I'm Scott.
I'm Abe.
and thanks for tuning in to Between Two Stands, a show that takes a closer look at the personalities that make up the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. Um, we got an interesting question that I feel like a lot of people are curious about. And this question is from Roland Maki. Sorry if I butchered that, but Roland. He said, being a non-performer, I thought it would be interesting to hear how people like yourselves prepare for the audition. I'm sure that there's a lot of anxiety associated with such an experience. Life being what it is, I also suspect that there are situations that have taken place that a person would rather not discuss until now. Actually, yeah. My performance achievements lasted only 2 years playing trumpet. Found out that I could only play notes, but never figured out how to play music. So thank you, Roland, for that entry. That's a very good question, and I think we have a lot to talk about with it. So yeah, what are your initial thoughts, guys?
Abe, you want to go first?
Sure.
How about this? What was here's a start. Where was the most embarrassing? Did you have like the worst audition you ever had?
I mean, yeah.
So let's hear it.
Did you have the worst audition you've ever had? Why didn't he just write that?
Yeah.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
Yeah.
We broke
Where do we even begin with these auditions? I mean, so basically, do you want to start with the worst audition experience, or I'm crying, I'm laughing so hard already.
Oh, okay. How about this? I'll set the tone here.
Okay.
So my very first audition was for a substitute position for the Houston Symphony when I was at Rice, and I showed up. I was really nervous. Everything was very new to me, and I showed up with. And one of the obstacles as a percussionist is having all these sticks and gear to bring to these auditions. So I showed up and rolled all my sticks in a towel, and had all the sticks I was using. And then I walk in. I'm nervous. Everything's new to me. I'm like, oh my god, this is my first audition. And I put my sticks rolled in a towel on a chair, and they just all open up and fall off. And it was like the most embarrassing thing. I thought I lost at that moment. Like, I actually probably provided some entertainment for the people behind the screen, but like, as a kid, you're like, oh my god, it's hard to recover, especially if it's the first time you've ever done something like that. So that was the very first audition I had. And another audition I had, I was doing fantastic, but I didn't learn all the pieces. Percussion auditions, there's so many pieces. And one of them I was like, they won't ask that. Of course, on one of the later rounds they asked it. It was Nutcracker. Some part of the Nutcracker, and I just didn't learn it. And I was sight reading. I was looking at it on the spot, just like, and like not playing it well or musically. And I think that's why I didn't get that job. But you learn every time you do it. You learn, right? Like it's like,
well,
Yeah.
At least it was a really obscure piece like the Nutcracker.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
you don't play that every year or every other year. So
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had an audition for a ballet orchestra, and thankfully they didn't ask for the Nutcracker in the audition, but we ended up playing it like over 30 times a year. So
Oh my God.
I think I wouldn't be surprised by any part of the Nutcracker
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
But just some things to clarify. Like auditions, we hear about them far enough in advance, and then the things that we have to prepare are typically solo, like maybe a solo or two, and then orchestral excerpts. They'll take snippets of like the standard orchestral rep that are have either been proven difficult by our predecessors by them screwing it up consistently in performances, or they're like exposed famous solos. And we have to play these excerpts on stage in a hall that we've traveled to for that after an opening has been announced, and these openings, they're career jobs typically, so they don't happen all that often, and there's usually and most orchestras have it to where it's a blind audition. So there's a screen up, nobody can see who you are, which I have been very grateful for in many circumstances. I had one audition where I played really well in the preliminary round, and then in the semifinal round, I don't know what happened, and it just didn't work for me at all. And sometimes, if it's in the later round, I usually be like, well, okay, that didn't work so well, so can I try that again? You can ask a proctor who will then be your voice for you, so they can't recognize your voice. And I was just like, well, can I please try that again? And I heard the music director from the orchestra say, no. It's like, oh, okay. Well,
I think I know how this is going to happen. Yeah, this is going to go. Oh, man.
But at that point, though, it could have also been something else,
Yeah, it could very much have been like, no, you don't need to do that again. We get it.
Right.
Like, that wasn't the best. And I was hoping for that. That wasn't the case.
Yeah.
But
but not the best thing to hear while you're sitting on stage.
It's also inflection. Nah.
A friend of mine who was also on that panel later came up to me and was like, so what happened? I'm just like, I didn't play well. That's what happened. I don't know.
Yeah. It is a very, very weird process that is unique to this job, and I guess like maybe acting I can imagine is similar, but like except for you're auditioning for a role, whereas this is like a permanent position, but it's something that the way I describe it is like it's something that you need to hone. It's a skill that needs to be perfected aside from just being a good musician. Like you can be a great musician, but you don't play well in auditions. So it's like you got to perfect both of those things. And for me, it was just taking a bunch of them and getting used to it. But it's a very uncomfortable situation, and I mean, some people feel differently about it, but it's just weird. It's playing under a microscope, and in many ways, it's better to play in the orchestra,
Yeah, well, it's a very sort of an abstract thing, right? You're taking one voice out of the orchestra and having 100 people come in and play that voice, which doesn't necessarily lend itself to the most accurate way of identifying the best people to be in the orchestra. But that is the process that we have, and so everybody does it. And the way that I think about it is it's sort of like a mixture between some sort of, I don't know, maybe 1,000-meter sprint in combination with the subjectiveness of ice skating and gymnastics in an Olympics, where you have basically one shot to get it right. And even if you do really, really well, the orchestra can still say, well, I didn't like their sound. That's not going to fit in the orchestra. Or I didn't like their phrasing throughout, so no, even though it could have been an excellent audition.
Yeah, it definitely humbles you. I feel like it develops a thicker skin for everybody. Like you have to have a thick skin going into it, because there's no like coddling. There's no like, hey, you did really well, but blah blah blah. It's like usually if you play something and you're cut, you hear, "Thank you," and that's it. And it's just like,
yeah,
ooh. And then you just pack up, you kind of maybe go to the bar, and then do it all over again. It's like it's a roller coaster for sure.
So I don't know if y'all have this experience, but have you ever like heard sort of a like, thank you, and then you're like, oh, maybe it was good, and then they cut you as well, wasn't good at all.
Yeah.
That's probably the inflection of them hiding a laughter or something, right?
It very well could be.
Right.
Someone say thank you. Someone say thank you. Thank you.
So I had an experience for an orchestra that shall not be named, and there were two things. Well, I have two stories, but the first thing is this first orchestra. I showed up. I thought I had all the excerpts, and I'm getting my excerpts ready for the night before I leave. And I realized looking at the sheet that I hadn't learned one of the excerpts, and I didn't have the music, and the school library was closed. And I don't think IMSLP was around quite that yet. So I had to call a conductor friend of mine and have them basically dictate out the part to me. And I wrote it down on manuscript paper, learned it that night, and then went to the audition. And I don't know what happened. I think either they didn't ask that excerpt or I managed to play it okay. And then the other thing that happened is in the final round of that audition, there was an excerpt from Swan Lake, and there's this famous duet between violin and cello that happens while dancers are obviously on stage. And I didn't know that it was a duet, so the final round comes and says Swan Lake with concertmaster, and I didn't know how it went.
Oh,
even though I knew how my part went. So I had to call the same friend and have them tell me what the rhythms were for the violin part in the score and try and find a way to listen to it. Because I think also, I'm not sure I even had like a smartphone yet. I mean, this was 12 years ago. At this point.
I mean,
so
but you learn something from it. It's right. It's like now you're like I will always read the entire thing and be very diligent about everything they say, because you never. I mean, the goal is always to get to the finals and win, but like especially in your younger career, you're like, I won't need that. I won't need to worry about that. And then when you get there, you're like, I probably should have looked at this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting with how you prepare for auditions too, because so much of it's like learning, the music itself, but most of the excerpts are so standard by the time you get to a certain level that it's not like you have to relearn the music that you've known for years. It's more about, and this is kind of a vague answer to a question, but because it's so individual, everybody has to prepare in the way that makes them perform the best. Right. And I think for me, it's practicing performing as comfortably as possible. Like still giving my voice, still giving as much music as possible, but how am I going to be consistent and comfortable and convincing in these moments that are very nerve-wracking, tense. There's a lot of pressure put on you. You got about 10 minutes. You've been preparing for, sometimes months, and you got about 10 minutes. Yeah. So yeah.
And one of the obstacles for us, like I was saying earlier, as percussionists, is like just the sheer amount of music and instruments that need to be played at a high level. So it's like
that tambourine was excellent, but the triangle, we can't have that triangle.
You know what, dude?
And that cymbal crash was way too early.
You joke about it, but seriously, I mean that there have been many times where that's what differentiates people, No,
right. Absolutely, definitely. I mean, all those things are really important, because when you really need the triangle to sound a certain way, you really need the triangle to sound a certain way, or be on time, or have the right. It's
mostly just
really
it's just like sound quality. It's that's what separates people is especially all these great young players now. Everyone can play a lot of instruments, but it's like those smaller, niche instruments where it like really separates people. So, it's a challenge. And for me, like I feel comfortable when I kind of I have to put long hours in, just touching everything every day. But that's what makes me feel comfortable. And Abe, do you have like something that makes you like something that you revert to that kind of like makes you feel comfortable playing?
You mean in terms of what, like the way that I'm practicing, or the way? I've sort of gone through so many phases to figure out what works, and I feel like even though I've in my career I've won 3 different auditions, I feel like for each one I was at such a different point in my life that I used different tactics.
Yeah.
To get ready. The most recent one, which I don't know how it is for you guys, but on every committee there's people listening who don't necessarily play your instrument, and while they might know how the excerpt goes, they're not necessarily familiar with what it looks like in a part. And so one of the things that I started going towards is, okay, I know all the cellists know how it's supposed to go and what it looks like in the part, but can I play it in a way where a violinist or violist who doesn't know what the part looks like can look at the part and say, oh, that's how it goes. Good.
Right.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people will look at it and say, well, that forte was not quite in the right place, or that piano or that diminuendo started too early. And so, or this thing wasn't I don't know. It's such a strange thing to think about. But that's sort of what I've gone towards recently is just playing in a way where I feel like the people that know how it goes can understand that is a possibility of how it should go. So my idea is to say, okay, this is how Beethoven 5 goes. This is how La Mer goes. This is how Verdi Requiem goes, now that I know it.
Spell it out, yeah. Spell it out for him.
Right. And at the same time, you really have to be cognizant of the era in which the composer lives, or what type of sound quality you need for like a French composer versus a German composer, that kind of thing.
And also like orchestras have different sounds, right? Like you kind of have to like do your research and kind of see what their sound is, and it definitely, especially with like the older orchestras, I feel like just have these traditions that you would, it's obviously to your advantage to learn what they are,
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, but you don't want it to be like, the person you're replacing is like, oh, well, I know that they had like this horn player that played like this, so if I play like that, that's what they're looking for. But then it turns out you get there,
everyone hated
and they've
him.
hated that.
Yeah,
They hated that guy for 20 years, and they couldn't wait for him to retire. And so it's kind of tricky.
Right.
Well, guys, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I feel like, is it Roland, right?
Roland,
yeah. I mean, this is like the tip of the iceberg on this conversation. I mean, we could probably dedicate a whole series of episodes to it. So I think at this juncture, we could leave it at that and say that we probably answered your question very obtusely. So,
yeah.
So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Larry, and I will see you guys later.
Later, Abe.
I'm sure you know that light travels faster than sound. That's why some people appear bright until you hear them speak.
Thank you, Larry. Our guest today is first violinist Adrienne Rönmark. Adrienne is a homegrown Michigander with both her parents being previous DSO members. Adrienne studied at U of M and got her master's at the Cleveland Institute of Music. She held the position of assistant and associate concertmaster of the Ann Arbor Symphony before joining the DSO in 2008. Adrienne is an avid chamber musician and has also been a featured soloist with many of Michigan's orchestras, including the DSO. In addition, she also teaches many students privately. Adrienne lives with her husband, Eric, and their 3 children. Welcome, Adrienne.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, nice to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us in this silly adventure.
Yeah.
So how have you been?
Absolutely.
How have you been in like all the lockdown and the sort of coming out of the lockdown? How have things been for you?
Yeah, the beginning of it, I feel, was kind of a shocker and a whirlwind. And now I feel like we're all just like really in a flow. And it's actually been kind of a nice summer, different in a lot of ways.
Were you in charge of any of the homeschooling?
Yeah, like all of it.
Yeah. I feel for that. I mean, I can't even imagine, but like you've probably had to become an expert in certain subjects pretty quickly.
They were still enrolled in their schools, and so the virtual learning officially came through the schools. We're in 2 different schools, one public, one private.
Gotcha.
And 3 different grades. And they did a great job, and the teachers all were phenomenal at putting the content out there. But it was such a learning curve for everyone, right? With the technology.
Yeah.
To have all of a sudden 3 different curriculums within the house that I had to manage, and then all the emotions that come with it when the kid's you're not at school, you're not seeing your friends, your whole routine is thrown upside down, including our routine too.
Yeah, I was just about to say, as musicians, when we're not able to perform and we can't go to the hall and have that outlet to do, even if it's, some show that we might not care as much about. Like, you're still around your people, you're not at home, you're in a different environment. It's so nice.
All the fun parts of school are gone, like your friends and like goofing off and recess, and like now it's just like, now I just gotta study. That's not fun.
It's way less cool when mom tells you to do something than when your teacher tells you to do something.
Right. That is so true.
Yeah.
Recess, our favorite subject.
Right. Well,
Right.
we've asked you like 4 questions already, but we normally start off by starting off the show by asking our guests what music is on your stand right now.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of music on my stand right now, because one of the main ways that I've been keeping myself like in shape throughout all this is teaching. So I've got Bach, solo Bach, sonatas, partitas, got Bruch Concerto, Lalo Symphony Espagnole, Beethoven Concerto, and then probably a stack like this thick of etude books that I'm just pushing on all of my students. So they've really, done a great job keeping me in shape, and I'm just going through all that rep with them. And Brahms Hungarian dances. That's the new thing that's on my stand, because I'm going to do a workshop with them in a couple weeks on those. So I got to mark all the ones that they're going to play.
Oh, okay. That was a long answer. The Bruch, the Bach, the Beethoven, is that like students, or is that you, or is it both? It's all of the above?
It's students. Yeah,
Wow.
these are students that are playing this rep, and I demonstrate a lot in my lessons, and so it's really important for me to be able to like play what I'm teaching, right? Because we can only teach what we know, and that's my way of staying together, is just practicing this stuff on my own and then bringing that to them. So yeah, these are pieces they're working on.
Oh, that's kind of fantastic. When I was growing up, a lot of my teachers didn't demonstrate so much, and I am the opposite way. Like, whenever I'm in a lesson, I'm constantly playing, and I think it's really helpful to have that demonstration.
It's unbelievably helpful. Like, I've had teachers who shall remain nameless, but like will say something, and then like I need to see it. I need to be able to hear it. I need to be able to like see their technique, see how they're doing it, and it's hard, to take their word for it. So it's cool that you're like, doing that too. That's important for them.
Did you find that the teaching experience that you have like helped with the DSO Summer Institute that we finished about a week ago? Like, did you like really bring that all together?
Yeah.
And how was your experience with that?
That was a great institute. I had a blast working with those kids. Not kids, they're adults, fully formed adults.
Yeah.
And I have to say that, when I got asked to run the technique portion of it, I kind of hesitated, because, these are like postdoc students, a lot of them. I mean, we had 19 violinists in the institute, and very few of them were in their undergraduate studies. Most of them were at least postmasters or postdoctoral degrees. And so I kept kind of thinking like, okay, I'm going to teach them technique, but I should probably practice and figure out what I can teach them that they don't know.
Yeah,
and then
totally.
just the fact that you have 19 of them, and I'm not hearing them in private lessons. I don't really know they're playing or what they need. I was a little bit worried I was going to just tell them something that was like way beneath them, or they were going to say, oh, I learned that years ago from my teacher. Why is she telling me? So I went through and I listened to every single one of their auditions, all 19 of them. And I took like detailed notes on all of them. And I just tried to find like the common threads between everything, and really pull it out to the big picture, thinking like, what do we value as an orchestral violinist, and how can I boil that down to something really simple for them to be able to focus on? Because at this point in their learning, and I'm sure you guys can remember this, when you're taking auditions, you've gotten so much advice, the advice can't be reactionary. Like, they've heard almost everything. They just need to focus on it in a different way. And so I was trying to sort of take that angle with them.
It also doesn't hurt to have a reminder. I noticed, like, I remember in my schooling and having talked to people, like, even if you do hit some of those same points, cliche points or whatever, it's like, you know what? there's a reason for that, right? Like it's a good reminder to like be told, hey, like I should do this. You know, if 5 teachers are telling me to do this, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
sometimes the way you bring it up too, like you'll attack it from just the right angle that'll make the concept click for that student at that
Right.
time, and it
That's
might
it.
just work well. But it seems like you put a lot of investment into that, and maybe just in general as a teacher, that's what you like to do. But that's impressive. Wow.
Yeah, thanks. I ended up actually with like 22 pages that I screen shared with them that I wrote down
Wow.
material, which was kind of obsessive, but you know, that's a little bit of my approach. Like I'm a very practical person, and I like to have things written out. I'm a visual learner. So, you know, I didn't want to just sit there and talk at them. And just the timing of it was really good because you know, I'm also running some workshops with my own private studio over the summer. So I was able to sort of use some of the content, you know, from the DSO Institute and use it with my own students as well.
Perfect.
And there was some crossover there. So yeah, it was great.
No problem with working smarter rather than harder. You know, that's a good advice for all. So for like in the bio I mentioned this, but you know, for people who don't know, you know, you grew up with the DSO. Your parents were both in the DSO. You know, you're truly
Hometown hero.
Which, you know, I know. We interviewed Nick, who grew up here in Michigan, but it's just very rare to have that, especially you know, have this orchestra kind of run in your blood. So, can you like tell us about how like that, you know, has affected you? I mean, Scott, your parents both play music too, so maybe you guys can both talk about it. But it's just fascinating to me that you kind of grew. I saw this picture of you as a baby on stage, Adrienne, and it's just kind of cool. And you know, this has been a long time where you haven't played or been in that hall. So like, tell us about like your experience with the DSO and maybe like what it's like to not have been there for a little while.
You know, that's like a huge complex story, right? Because
We got
I
time.
can't.
Just
Yeah.
kidding.
Okay. Awesome. I can't separate the DSO from my childhood. Like they are together, you know, not just from like my musical experiences as a child or, you know, my interest in music as a kid, but just growing up, you know, just practically speaking, because both of my parents were working and they both had the same schedule. And, you know, if our babysitter couldn't come, guess where I was sitting? Backstage, right next to the stagehands, right behind the cello section.
Yeah.
So that as soon as, you know, so my dad, Wesley Jacobs, right, he was the tuba player for like 38 years or something, right? And my mom, Deborah Fayroyan, she was in the cello section for 30 years. So, you know, she played everything, being the string player, and my dad played most things, you know, being the brass player. And so whenever I was just hanging out at work, like Dad would come off stage and he would sit with me when he wasn't playing a piece, and then he'd go back on. And then when both of them were on stage, it was like some other orchestra member that I was sitting next to who wasn't, you know, playing that particular piece, or literally like Mike Brick, the, you know, stage hand before Dennis. And a lot of those guys just, and on tours, like all I did was just sit backstage. I developed the backstage clap, right? That, you know, because I didn't want to like make too much noise. And so I'd sit there and I go like this, right?
Nice.
Clap between pieces. I mean,
I like that.
you know,
I like to
that's
borrow
just
that.
like one of a million stories, you know, summertime, right? Growing up at Meadowbrook, you know, at the music festival outdoors there, that was the summer home for the DSO for many, many years of my childhood. Rehearsals, I mean, we would just take like cardboard boxes and open them up and go slide down the hill, like the backside of the hill.
Can we still do that? Are we too old for that?
No,
We're not too
you're
old
never
for that? Okay, good. Because that sounds, I want to do that next time I'm there. That sounds really fun. It does look very inviting. It's like like steep hill.
Yeah.
So
there were like 4 or 5 other women in the orchestra that had babies at the same time as my mom. And there were a few others that were spouses of orchestra members that also had children at the same time. So really there was kind of a clan of us that were born like within the span of a year, and we all like grew up together. And, you know, like I said, on tour, we were all like in the same hotel room when, you know, concerts were happening. And that was a huge part of like a lot of the friendships that I had, you know, outside of my school friends as a young kid, you know. Yeah, it was just, I can't separate that from, you know, from
maybe a follow-up question. What's like your earliest memory that with the DSO? Do you have one, or you know, maybe your earliest musical memory?
So I remember when you're laughing.
Sorry, it's just like, I mean, I just know with my parents, like I was probably 3 years old sitting at the piano, and it's hard for me to have that specific memory. And so it's sort of like, what's your earliest musical memory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
Yeah.
maybe go ahead and tell us, like, if you have something, or maybe the DSO or the hall or anything.
Well, you know, for a lot of my early childhood, the DSO was not at Orchestra Hall. We were at Ford Auditorium.
Oh, right.
And so that was, you know, that was a big part of it. There was sort of this room, this like common room, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of the structure there. And I just remember it was like really open and had a whole bunch of windows, and that's sort of where like people would unpack, or at least the women maybe would unpack. And I remember like hanging out in that room with a lot of the other kids that were my age. And at this point, I must have been maybe like 3, 4, 5, something like that. And, you know, I can remember just random conversations with orchestra members who would come up. And actually, I think it was Stacy Woolley, who was a violinist in the orchestra at that time. And he was the first person to like put an instrument under my chin, right?
See, that's cool. That's
and, like,
awesome.
Hold the violin. And, you know, and then later, I mean, it wasn't necessarily because of him that I wanted to start, but, you know, like just I got an instrument a few years later than that, and, you know, just all that exposure. But that was one of my earlier memories. I can remember when the orchestra moved into Orchestra Hall again. You know, I was older, but it was just that building, right? So it wasn't like none of the Macs, none of the stuff attached. I mean, there was literally just like a trailer on the side. And so all the old staircases in the back were like, people didn't really use them for regular traffic. Like the ushers didn't ask people to, you know, go up and down, but I would just like climb the staircases and just figure out where they went.
That seems
That's
like
awesome.
sort of a paradise as a child. Just
Right,
like, I
right.
am going to climb these creepy staircases.
Yeah, and they were pretty creepy too.
And your
you
dad's
know,
your dad's playing tuba, and he's like, "Oh, Adrienne's up there in the 4th rafter." Anyway, whatever, whatever. She's fine.
Yeah, all good.
So I have to ask, because my parents are both reed players, and I was like, I'm avoiding that. There's no way I'm gonna play reeds. Like, did you avoid the low register? Were you like, oh, I have to play melodies, please? Or was it just like the experience of having the violin under your chin and just like that whole thing that took you to it? Or did you not even think about it?
I don't think I thought about it. I didn't really, you know, I got a violin as a Christmas present, I think, when I was in kindergarten. And, you know, my mom showed me how to hold it. And like for years, all I did was just sort of tinker around with it and play with the radio. You know, like that was my thing, was just listen to WQRS and, you know, listen to Charles and just sort of play along with what was going on in the radio. I really honestly didn't, I was kind of a latecomer to the wanting to be a musician party. Like, I didn't decide until I was in high school that I really wanted to be a musician. I played the flute. I played piano for many, many years. I really don't think I took music seriously at all. And, you know, my parents were fine with that because they were, if anything, they were like, please go get a civilian job. And, you know, fully supportive of me and my career once I decided. But, you know, they didn't push it on me at all. I had early lessons on the violin, then I quit, and then I came back to it when I was in middle school because I didn't want to take band, and I took my semester of choir and typing, and so the only thing that was left for me was orchestra. And in order to be in the orchestra in middle school, you had to take private lessons. And so that was when I started studying with Bob Murphy, actually, who was a violinist
Wow.
in the DSO.
That's
And
awesome.
who I grew up with his daughters, right? And
Yeah.
so he was my teacher, and pretty soon I figured out, like, hey, I'm okay at this. It's kind of fun. And then a few years later in high school, I was like, yeah, this is the easiest thing for me to do, so I'm just gonna do this.
Totally get it. I totally get it. That's kind of how I mean, it was easy because it was fun, right? Like, I feel like that's a good distinction. Like, it's so that's kind of how I chose it too. I was like, I'm having fun, so maybe I should consider this.
Yeah.
For me, I just love the people that we're constantly surrounded by. Like all these artist personalities and musicians that have this common passion and like slight obsession, and sometimes not the healthiest way. It's like, yes, I want to be around these people as much as possible. And how can I do? Well, I have to be one of them.
Join the force. Join the force. So Adrienne, you also have a different perspective in this way. You are married to the vice president and GM of the orchestra, Adrienne Rönmark, who's an awesome dude. We love Eric.
Great musician, his own right,
saxophone player. How does if it does? How does your experience in the orchestra differ from maybe mine? Who, my wife has no connection with the orchestra, but like you kind of have the inside of both music and the faculty.
Yeah, it's definitely opened my eyes to the complexities of running a business, running an organization. I feel like in a way, we are very protected on stage, right? Like we go on stage, we do our jobs, and we do them really well, and we're sort of allowed this bubble to be in, so that we can focus on doing our jobs so well. But there's so much that goes on, just 24/7, not only in our industry, but, within the DSO itself. And I think, over the years, I've really been privy to seeing how that works. And I know what I'm seeing is only the tip of the iceberg, because we don't talk about work. We have a lot of other stuff to talk about. But,
I'm sure you might talk about your 3 kids every so often too, like
yeah, like,
and other things.
Some very basic needs, right? But no, I mean, it's pretty it's pretty interesting for me to really see that side of it. I have so much respect for the people in our administration, because we have really good people who work as hard as they can to make the best decisions that they can, and who are skilled, like we are, in doing their jobs. And that's not something that every organization can say, but it's definitely something that we can say here in Detroit. And just the sheer number of hours that go into the simplest of decisions, I mean, it's really, it's pretty humbling to see. I mean, he works 7 days a week, and there's just relationships that have to be kept up, because, like I said, our industry is 24/7. Our industry is global, and there are people in other time zones, and, everything that he deals with is time sensitive. And if he's not right there, then that could be a loss for the organization. So I feel lucky that he's in that position. And I think that, it's really given me a huge insight and respect into how the whole thing works.
It is really kind of amazing how much planning goes into every little detail that we have, so that we do have that bubble, and the only thing we have to worry about as musicians is playing our part as well as we can with each other the best way possible. It's so nice.
Speaking of Eric, it's your guys' 15-year anniversary 2 days ago, right? Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. Did
you guys do anything special?
Well, we did have dinner by ourselves, not at the same time as the kids, and the kids were actually really sweet about it. They were like, "We're gonna go downstairs, and you won't even know we're here."
Oh, that's so nice. Oh.
It was really great. So we cooked some good food and sat down with a bottle of wine and a couple of candles on the table, and just like pretended we were gonna sit outside, but then it was raining. So
And then 5 minutes later, you hear, "Mom!"
No, they were really good. I mean, I don't know what they were watching on TV or what they were doing, but they're pretty good about, with the level of just like constant zooming in the house right now. They're pretty respectful about not just like walking in the door. Well, they haven't walked in the door yet. So
That's true. Yeah.
If my siblings and I were really quiet, if we were really quiet, then my parents would get more and more suspicious that we were up to something. Like, wait, we haven't heard anything.
Give up on that suspicion. Like, just let it be. If it's quiet, then no one's really hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so Adrienne, you have expressed like an interest. Maybe it was this summer, or maybe you've done it before. But in gardening, you said that's been a hobby of quarantine.
Yeah, I finally had time to put in our vegetable garden here. At our old house, we had like a small sort of garden, and so for years I just grew like tomatoes and kale and stuff. But ever since we moved like 4 or 5 years ago into this house, I haven't had a chance to get it set up, and it's been really great actually. I've got ton of stuff growing. I've got garlic, potatoes, leeks, squash, tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, kale, cabbages, bok choy spinach, lettuce, radishes, peas, carrots, beets.
Wow.
Peppers include like 3 different kind of peppers, plus like Thai hot chili peppers, Hungarian hot wax peppers, and then like herbs, parsley, cilantro, basil, mint, chives.
And are these all raised garden beds, or is this like just like a dedicated area of the backyard?
No, it's well, it's kind of all over the place. I mean, I've got raised beds on the side of the house, and then like a planter on the deck, some pots in the front. The garlic's just thrown out in the woods in the back, so we'll see how that actually turns out. But it's been great because we've been doing like a lot of cooking. Yeah. Because we have a lot of time and a lot of people.
And not a lot of restaurants.
And not a lot of restaurants. Yeah, we haven't actually had a single restaurant out since March. Like we've cooked every meal every day.
Good for you guys.
So we've gotten into some like really cool like themed days. So we have Taco Tuesdays, right? Which I think all of you saw me cooking Taco Tuesday on some of the orchestra meetings.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Making us jealous.
We have Pizza Night Fridays, which is super fun, where we make our own pizzas and we just like pull things from the garden and throw them on.
Dough from scratch, or do you like?
No, we get the dough delivered from Whole Foods. Yeah, because it's just I have been baking bread though, so that's been kind of fun. A new adventure.
That's fun.
And then we do sushi on Sundays. That's another thing where we like pull cucumbers from the garden and some veggies, and no raw fish because the kids don't eat the raw fish yet. But like shrimp tempura rolls and California rolls and stuff. So
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah.
So you're gonna enjoy that until this gets out, and all of a sudden you have a bunch more rabbits getting into the garden somehow.
Yeah, right.
Let me tell you, I sealed off that side. I mean, the chipmunks have found my planter on the deck, but that side, I spent like 3 days just like stuffing chicken wire and hardware cloth and everything, and that thing is like Fort Knox. Like nothing is getting in that garden unless it flies in from above.
It's amazing how much you like those little chipmunks until you have a garden.
Right.
Like, oh, cute.
Yeah. I have a similar problem. I've had to fortify, like, like all of a sudden there's they take one bite out of a tomato. They don't even eat the whole thing. They don't have the decency to eat the whole thing. It's like a bite and then they leave it for dead. And I'm like, at least eat the whole damn thing, like now I'm just sitting here and I'm like, so I had to like put a fence, and now I have to put something on top. So, but like you also don't want to make it look bad, it's got to be like, it's got to look nice. So yeah, I feel your pain, but I'd love to see some pictures of it. Maybe you could send it to us.
Yeah, I can send it. What are you growing in your garden?
I have, so I feel like every year I learn something new. I have some herbs and some vegetables. Next year I want to do herbs in a separate area and just do vegetables, because I feel like herbs don't need to take up valuable real estate in the raised garden beds. But so anyway, I have arugula, tomatoes, rosemary, basil, dill, kale, peppers, chives, and zucchini. And it's been feeding us a lot, actually.
I have a funny story about zucchini. So
Excellent.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
yeah. So I bought zucchini starters, right? When this, this all started in the spring, and planted them, and they're growing like crazy, and they're just totally taking over the planter. And so Eric like built this I don't know, trellis kind of thing behind it with the chicken wire and some lumber that we had laying around. And then we started seeing the zucchini growing, and I'm thinking, this is the weirdest looking zucchini I've ever seen. It's like mutant. It's like 3 feet long.
Oh, wow.
And like really light color. And I finally asked, I put like a picture up on Facebook or something, and one of my friends who does a lot of like real gardening, she's phenomenal at it. She goes, "Oh, that's not zucchini. That's cucuzza squash. It's Italian squash." And I was like, "Oh, well, good to know I don't have mutant zucchini."
Is it the same thing though, or is it similar or?
So it's a summer squash, and you can use it like you would use a zucchini, but it's actually, I kind of like it better. I mean, you can eat it raw, or you can like cook it in a stew. Or I haven't tried this yet. The reason I wanted to grow zucchini was because I make zucchini muffins for my kids, like Nutella zucchini muffins.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God! Have you not brought those in? Can you bring those in at some point to a rehearsal so I could have them all?
Sounds good. Yeah. So,
Oh
but now it's going to be like cucuzza zucchini. No, it's cucuzza Nutella muffins, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I'm going to try that and see how that works. But yeah, it was kind of funny because they literally grow like more than 2 to 3 inches a day.
Wow.
And so you can have this like little thing on the vine one day, and the next day it's like that long, and they're hanging down. And
That'd be
Were you like a little depressed? Were you hoping that you had like mutant zucchini that were just amazingly fast growing, or was it like, okay, I know something's up here?
You win like first prize for the largest zucchini.
Yeah, right. Where's the county fair when you need it,
Right,
right? That
exactly.
could have been.
I think we have a very important question next to ask.
Okay.
Scotty?
How does Brahms 4 go?
Which part? The audition excerpts?
That's totally up to you. So you by the way, you admitted to us that you haven't seen our whole show all the way through, and so you would have known that we ask everyone to sing. So, but Brahms 4 is the first one that we've asked. So you have a full choice of whichever part you want.
Whatever part.
All right. Well, let's go with the fourth movement. And that's the top of my register.
Yes, nice,
Awesome.
beautiful.
Thank you.
I
very
recognize
much.
that part. Well, hey,
Yeah.
Adrienne, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out of your day. It's been great.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hopefully we'll see you soon, and maybe we'll even perform at some point.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be great.
All right. Take care, Adrienne.
Bye.
All right, see ya.
Thank you for tuning in to Between Two Stands. If you have any questions for us or for our guests, please email us at betweentwostands@gmail.com. Also, don't forget to tune in to this week's watch parties. Thank you, and see you next time.